Okay, so I'll start with the questions. Yeah, hello. Okay, I'll start with the questions. So the first question is, how can missions best work together to allow contemporary and complementary multi-mission data?
Also, I think XMM was going. It's clearly we have them only with a really large missions, but the number of TOOs, time constraint and time constraint adjoint observation, this is in some way on the limit. We can very hardly often get an additional TOO in. Therefore, I think we are on the limit what can be done in this range TOO joint and these large things. And I don't see we can get much more. You must only see each mission has its own science things, especially in the beginning, which it can only answer and has to address.
So I can also add a comment. So I don't know exactly the goal of this question, but back a few years ago, we tried an exercise with some colleagues because I mean the point was not only to increase the amount of multi-wavelength program and possibilities and so on, but actually to make them more efficient. And this started when there was the outburst of V404 Cygni, which is a very famous source. I think everyone knows about it. We reached 60 crab and so on. And at that time, there was madness because people were trying to organize observations from one side of the globe to the other, to check what everyone else was doing. And I think this was really the first example where it was shown that it's not only, I mean, missions and satellites and different telescopes, but it's actually the community, which is not well organized. I mean, the community doesn't have the means to organize and to set up a very multi-wavelength efficient plan, so to have multiple instruments looking at the same time. So at that time, we tried an exercise and we said, okay, now we sit down, and we went at this Lawrence Center in the Netherlands. It was chaired by Matt Middleton, Pranab Ghosh, and Pier Giorgio Casella. Okay, they were chairing this together with me. And we said, now we want to play an exercise and we want to ask, I think Norbert was there also, Chandra PI. And we say, okay, there was a bunch of people from different telescopes, and we wanted to find a way for people not to use emails. So let's say, what do you need to be online in order not to send a million emails around, try to coordinate these things? So this was when the SmartNet community was born, which is based on an online platform, which is still there. But actually never took off. The reason is that, I mean, people are really attached to emails. I think what we discovered with this exercise in all these years from 2017 is that, I mean, as long as we have human beings, that's the bottleneck, in the sense that people need to interact. So although you have an online platform which allow you to exchange messages, data, share your data with different people, and so on, you have a list of people that you can contact in the different facilities. At the end, people always choose emails because that's more direct mean. So my modest opinion in all this, because I'm not really a multi-wavelength expert, but my guess on this is that the only way really to move forward, so to have really, you know, something getting planned very well, it's that this must be automatized in some way. So how we do today with the robotic telescope, there must be an automatic way in such a way that when we choose some kind of source to be a green light to observe it, and this has to be automatized to some extent. So as long as there is a human decision step, then it will always require emails. I mean, at least we attempted, it wasn't successful. I know that several attempts are also ongoing in the NASA side, although I don't know the details, but with this TDRS, the TDAMM working group, they are trying to work around this issue as well. I think there's no solution yet, but I mean, this is open for comments to the community, but that was my experience at least.
So I would say now, in fact, people don't have the need to try to organize, and they try to do their thing on their own to try to have visibility in terms of having a big discovery and things like that. At the time of gravitational wave, for instance, the ground follow-up, especially for the event in 2017, everybody tried to do their own stuff with their own facilities, trying to be the first to detect an optical counterpart to a gravitational wave event. But the point is, and they managed because it was easy, because the source was closed and gave us everything. But now, in fact, with RUN 03, it started to be a bit more complex and more difficult. And you can't use a time telescope over the planet just to search for nothing, basically. So ESO, for instance, decided to force a large collaboration who requested plenty of nights to do that type of thing, to say, okay, guys, you have exactly the same science goal. Whatever you do, next round, just one proposal. That's it. And they created ENGRAVE. Same thing for the robotic telescope. In fact, to be competitive with respect to others, they were forced to collaborate together. And I think at the time of LSST and the time of SKA, where we will be, well, we have so many targets to follow, we will not be able to do that. We will be forced somehow to organize ourselves, because otherwise we will not be able to do anything, any science, and that will be a shame. So I would say when time will be needed, we will try to organize. What would be good is to do it now, before doing it when we will be completely, where we will receive tons of alerts in general. But it will happen at some point.
So just to follow up, are you also suggesting that we try to automatize this for the future rather than relying on single people spread around to do that?
You could automatize at some point, but I would say human in the loop will still be necessary, just first for to design the tools, to select, for instance, what type of target you would like to follow, because you will have to choose, for instance, with a nice talk of Emily yesterday, basically, you will have to choose a type of target you would like to follow, because you know you will not be able to spend all the XMM time or Swift time or whatever to do to follow all these type of targets. So you will need to define specific tools to be able to classify this alert, to try to identify the source you would like to observe, and then make a choice. The choice could be automatic, because you could sometimes have a ranking saying, okay, this source will be, it would be better to observe this source for this, and this reason, and that could be handy and automatic. But you have to put first a human choice about what type of science you would like to do, because you will have to choose.
Thank you. Are there any follow-up questions? Okay, so moving on. Moving on from just scientific questions, I would like to ask, what strategies do you think can be employed to ensure inclusivity and diversity in missions? What strategies can be employed to ensure inclusivity and diversity?
Can I answer the previous question? Yes. Can I comment on the previous question? No, I think back to your first question. I think for Athena, it's very hard to see project, because I think I am sitting here because of Athena. And it's my assumption, underlying assumption. It's very hard to see how we will operate with the other facilities. However, we have, in the context of the previous Athena, we have run some white papers about synergies with the ESO facilities, with SKA, for instance, and we have a lot of common scientific objectives, which should lead to common scientific programs at some points. But the implementation, it's too hard to say how this will be done. But I'm pretty sure that this will be done in a similar way than how it's done today with XMM. And about TOs, we are not going to be a TO machine on antenna. It's mostly the limitation today is driven by the cost of the operation on the ground, and we have a fixed target, a cost target that we don't want to exceed. So we will stick to the numbers that we are given today with VAISA, which is of the order of 2 TO per month, which is comparable to what XMM does, right? 2 per week today. So. Okay, then I forgot your second question.
The second question was, what strategies do you think are necessary in order to ensure that there is inclusivity and diversity in such large missions?
Oh, it's a very bad start because already this panel is not very gender balanced. So,
More reason to answer the question.
I mean, if I speak about my experience, I would say that, I mean, these big projects like Teseus or Athena, they have such huge consortia behind that, you know, diversity is already ensured. There is a political limitation to that, if you wish, because of course, I mean, big project involves industries, a lot of work, technology, and so on. And here we have to follow the recommendation of agencies and so on. So we have to limit our participation and the share of, let's say, of building these instruments with who we can. But among, for example, the member states in ESA, I think, I mean, these are very inclusive. In Teseus, for example, now, which is a bit more under my control, I would say we are really making an effort, and we saw that there is, you know, interest in every country. So we visit every member state in ESA, and we try to involve everyone who is interested.
Let me add something in the context of time domain. It was supposed to be time domain, right? It's discussion, but that's fine.
Yeah.
On XIFU, it's let's try to be to put some numbers. We have basically a consortium today of 300 people. We have 15% of colleagues, female colleagues, and the rest is we pay special attention to promoting as much as we can women, but within this constraint that the consortium is dominated by women, but by men. But all the communication, every time we communicate, we try to promote, and we do a lot of actions to, but at least in France, to promote XIFU towards to emphasize on the need for more gender balance, diversity, inclusivity, and it's part of, it's one of the reasons why I have someone doing the communication activities just for to help me within the consortium to manage the consortium, but also to do this type of activities, which are very important.
Just to extend the concept of diversity, what about involving more people with handicaps, for example? From blind, where now we have codes that can actually help reading and computer, so they can help for any kind of handicap. At our institute, we have a specific requirement when we make out a call, underline that people with handicaps are welcome. So I wonder whether there is something specifically done also in when you are hiring for these new missions.
So in ESA, I am very sure this is done in all applications now, that we try to come to a more balanced thing. How much it works out is a completely different story. Also for me, from the practical work, with this OTAC, the user scope member, I try in principle to get to a gender balanced situation. And there I run typically in the problem of experienced female researchers. And I get especially now for chairpersons. I need really experienced person. Makes no sense to put someone as chairperson who's not unexperienced, because then the discussion switch and someone else takes it over. And say, okay, with ESA, I try to get the nationalities balanced. Italy, I think, is the only country in Europe I have no problem. But if I go to France, experienced X-ray researcher, I think the 2 or 3 which are available, I ask quite often. But and this is in ESA, all ESA recommendation systems like this. And what I feel, in principle, we put too much burden on this. And clearly, they often say, no, sorry, I have already, and the others have the same problem. I think really what should be changed is basically the number of female experienced and female researchers. And this is not on ESA, this is in the institutes. And I am not sure if the situation today is better than in the past, because it's my impression, you play around, people get for 2 years research fellow, 2 years and 2 years. And I have the feeling this presses much more females out as men. And I have no one, I follow it, the papers, fine, it has she 5 papers, I ask, is you panel? No, I leave. But I think it is the most obstacle is not on a personal level, it is a hiring praxis in the institute and universities. If you ask people 10 or 15 years on such limited position and then jumping, is my impression that females are much less willing to do this than men, and this then bias the whole thing on a long scale. And if you look this one plot which I show, our ratio starts with in the proposals with this very high fraction, and then when you see it, it is exactly 2 postdocs, and then we are down by 20%.
I'm really conscious of the fact that I'm a straight white cisgender male making a comment on diversity here, but I don't agree with you, Enrico, that diversity is guaranteed in a collaboration like Athena because it's big. I invite you to look around the room at the next WFI Athena meeting, and you'll find it's very white and very male. I think the most diverse meeting from a mission I've been to was at a SFOM BA school in Les Houches a few years ago, which had the best gender balance of any meeting I've been to in my life. So well done, SFOM team. Tell us what you do. I think there are things that we can all do, but they're hard. I heard this from a talk from someone who was from a minority, so this is not my idea. But there's a point. Because of all of my natural advantages for which I can take no credit, I get more exposure than someone who is female or black or of color or disabled or whatever. And so I have what they call social capital, and what I can do, and it's hard because I have an ego and I have a career to pursue. But when you come to me and say, hey, Phil, why don't you give this talk? I can say, actually, do you know what? I've got a colleague or a collaborator who is from a less privileged, not less talented, but from a less privileged and therefore statistically less likely to get invited than me. Can I send them instead, please? If Norbert, you asked me to be on attack, I could accept, but I could also say, do you know what? Could I please ask you to ask this colleague of mine instead? That's not on you, that's on me and on all of us to recognize where we have privilege. We can actually use that, use what's called our social capital, I understand, to raise the capital of underprivileged people.
And a female, she rejects and recommends me a man.
Well, maybe I'm not blaming you for this, Norbert. I'm saying this is something that's on all of us that we can do, is be aware, especially if we're in the privileged groups, we can actually recognize that some of our invitations come about because of our privilege, not just because of our wonderful personalities. And we can pass those on and actually enable more visibility to people who are not getting invited in that way. And it's a small step, but something I would encourage us all to try. But it's hard to do, you know, because we have egos.
I agree, Phil, with you, but there is also a question of time pressure. So I feel that this task is not really up to the person who is invited. I mean, it's something that should be decided. I mean, many SOC and is this the task of the SOC to actually send invitation in a gender balanced way. I mean, you cannot ask a person who is invited to turn it down and propose somebody else. Otherwise, we enter in the loop. But when you are part of the SOC and you receive or you collect the list of invited speakers, if you are speaking about invited speakers, then it's your task to say, look, guys, we selected a bunch of men. There's no gender balance. There's no minority inclusion and so on. So that's, I mean, this is a priori, right? I mean, first you do that and then you send the invitations.
I
Then
don't
if
think the
you
two are
if
mutually
you-
exclusive. I agree with you, but I also think that those of us receiving invitations can be aware of our privilege and try to pass it on a bit. You know, I think it works both, but
Yes and no. I mean, you don't know the invitation list, so you hope it's done in a proper way. But
We have here an XMM every year conference or the workshop. And we try it always to make the invited talks balanced completely. And I think it never works out because females much more frequently say no. And then if they have a replacement, it's normally not a female. And I think it's simply the number, there's a beginning number with this 20% is too low to keep it up. I think this is really the point to improve it.
Claire Greenwell, Durham. Could this be a bit self-selecting? Like, are you asking the same women because there's only so many visible women? For example, we don't get experience unless people help us get experience. So you only see the same experienced women to invite. So they turn you down because they get invited to everything.
My selection is simply the PIs from proposals from the last 5 or 7 years. I don't make there anything. Then I look for the country and then I look who was not in the last 2 years. Then I start to check the papers. And I think who should write proposals, the people who proposes. I think this is a natural selection.
I still think there might be some inherent bias in that sort of selection.
Yeah.
Yeah, just want to agree about the fact that, yeah, often women, I think, say no is because they get asked to a lot of things. But yeah, it's true that we need to make sure that we are using all of the women, or all the diversity and all of the other people. But yeah, that's, I think, the reason why a lot of people say no is because they actually have to be, maybe for even just legal reasons, they have to have at least one woman or at least one something or other in that committee. And then in the end, we end up just overloaded. At least I'm going to speak from a woman's point of view. I don't know about the others.
Yeah, okay, so moving on, we have another question. What capacity should future X-ray observatories have according to you?
High resolution spatial result spectroscopy. No, I think we have beautiful missions planned with the right capabilities. I think if you look at SWAM, Theseus, and Athena, I think we cover, from my perspective, a lot of the exciting science that has to be covered after what we have today. That's for me, and I think the window of polarimetry also opened recently, with delivering outstanding results. I mean, we focus on X-rays because I think there will be more revolution to come elsewhere. But for us, I think from my window, which is obviously totally unbiased, I think the next big thing is indeed to do, arc-second scale images with high resolution spectroscopy to probe those very extended diffuse sources, which we want to understand as building blocks of the universe. For me, that's one of the key things. I really hope that CRISM opens this window for good, and call for those more uh, more powerful observations with Athena, but not in the 2050s, maybe in the 2030s would be enough.
Well, I think Didier is right. I mean, we have a lot of nice missions. I mean, on the pipeline. Let's say we hope so. I think I wanted just to remark a nice comment that was made by Phil before. That is this, how do we keep the community? I think this is a problem that today we are really facing. I mean, there's no solution. I mean, our US colleagues from StarX, one of the mission which was not selected a couple of days ago, they published this plot online, which I find very nice, and where they define this X-ray desert. So it's basically a hole in our future timeline where in X-rays there's really nothing. Now this plot is dating back a few years, so this X-ray desert is moving, shifting back and forth a couple of years depending on changing plans, but it's there. I mean, there is a time between 2030 and 2040, plus minus 2, let's say, where we do really face an issue today. Because, okay, we have Athena, 2037, 38, let's say, Theseus, 2037 at best. Then, okay, we had the probes in the US, which, the selection is already delayed. The previous mission, the Midex one, were delayed as well. So it is to be expected that also the probes maybe will be coming 2035, I don't know, something like that. And we have the current observatories, which at some point will stop. Now and then we have, of course, Swarm coming, we have CRISM, but they are coming today. So what will happen between 2030-ish and 2040-ish, I think is very unknown. And this is a big problem. So we do have nice ideas. We do have good, let's say, project. Now Athena seems to be on a safe path, as for what we know today. Everything else is still a question mark. The X-ray probes in the US are competing with the infrared probes, so we don't know which probe will be selected. So there is an uncertainty that is in front of us. We cannot do anything. It's a desert. We'll stick there with the sands moving back and forth, but it's there. So this is an issue that we have to face. We have a good solution, but if we can find something, maybe a smaller scale, but something which can also draw the European community, which is several thousand scientists during this time, that will be very important. As of today, there's nothing planned, as far as I can say.
The 2050s. So, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead if you had a comment.
Yeah, I mean, for the 2050s, there is a Voyage. You probably know that after Cosmic Vision, ESA has launched a Voyage 2050 program, which is becoming 2070 now. We'll take care of that for sure with LISA and Athena, and possibly other missions. Yeah, Phil Utley from University of Amsterdam put a nice idea of doing X-ray interferometry, which would be the big thing, but we are very far from being mature for this. But I think the proposal was well received, and there should be some funding for technology developments to see what the potential for this type of mission is after Athena. But it's a long distant future this time, indeed. But maybe something.
Just going back to the concept of the X-ray desert. So the only thing that will be available, there would be more than a decade probably, where there won't be anything observing. There's a chance there won't be any single mission, unless New Star and CRISM incredibly exceed their planned lifetime. So something that we should look, as Swift, of course, something that we should look towards is making sure that we take full advantage of the great archives that have been accumulated by XMM Newton, Chandra, Swift, and everything that's been operating so far. That would be a way to keep our community vibrant and alive in terms of skills and scientific questions and being able to continue to work in this field. I don't think there is any other alternative.
No, if you have, go ahead.
So In terms of instrumentation, so it's bias towards multi-messenger and time domain astronomy. I think what is missing at the moment is all sky coverage in X-rays. Because at the moment it's nice to have XMM, to have Chandra, but they are just doing pointings like this, or Swift doing pointings. But as we see during all these meetings about people doing classification, doing cross-matching and something like this, in fact, by having all these catalogs where you just have a snapshot of part of the sky, it's a nightmare to try to build something coherent because you have plenty of biases in all the way, in fact. So I guess to move forward to this, especially to try to match what will happen with 3G gravitational wave detectors, and also with LSST and something like this, I think this segment should be implemented in X-rays, in my point of view, and all sky things. And that will be good also for the community, in fact, because that type of thing will not be able to do everything because it will be a survey, but it will feed a lot of people, and you will be able to develop plenty of very nice tools as you show during this meeting, and that could feed for several years a community, in fact, because they will have plenty of stuff to study and to discover.
Also, I observed this very nearly what was happening in Germany. This ROSAT stopped, and then it was some 10 years to XMM, and the university groups don't survive this. And normally they are focused on a certain object class, say AGN, they go to other mission, was HST, for example. Without new data coming in, you don't keep PhDs. This archival case is too weak to convince a supporting structure. University groups disappear. And the universities normally make a very clever policy. If now someone goes out, when this Athena was nearer some years ago, they started to hire X-ray people. But in the moment where this is in question, they stop. And they ask new professors for a mission which comes in 8 years, sufficient time to build the group up to have it ready. And without this, from an archive, you don't find Nature papers in archives normally. Don't estimate this. Without new data, you don't keep groups in university alive.
So I'm sorry, but assuming that what really matters is only producing nature-worthy paper is a wrong model, okay?
No.
That's not going to
Yes.
apply to most of the younger generation of astronomers unless new generational
But you
different
have the completely different potential if you got a new data than data which were in principle the PI said already makes no sense to waste my time on it.
There will be a loss. We agree that would be residual science that can be done, well, marginal, but still it's a way to keep part of the community alive. But I don't
think
see any.
surviving are the big institutes which are fixed to it, which develop missions. But for university groups without hardware department, it's almost impossible to survive 10 years.
I just wanted to add,
Maybe let me add something more now. Also, I think we may have in Europe Oasis Desert. I am convinced in China they will launch a lot of missions. They have last year opened a big test facility to calibrate X-ray mirrors. They have now a factory ready who can make these mirrors like Athena it has. For what they build this if they don't launch missions? And they have 100 launches next year already, also in general. And I am sure that in this 10-year gap, they have fantastic big missions. If this is any accessible for us is a different question.
yeah, I fully, that's what I actually wanted to say, and I fully agree with Norbert. I mean, and as a matter of fact, for example, we know that they are planning something like HABS, which is the same as LEM in the US, is an X-ray large grasp microcalorimeter. I'm sure they are really putting money on these things, and I'm sure that they are going to cover this decade. I also agree that probably it won't be accessible to most of us, but yeah, I don't think. And the last thing I wanted to say is that it is true that universities and institutes and groups lose momentum, and probably they're going to die. But then once you have the instruments, I mean, the physics that these instruments are going to do, like, I mean, there is no other way to observe 10 to the 6 Kelvin gas in the universe, if not in X-rays and with a XIFU kind of instrument. So once it's there, the groups and then the momentum will grow again. And it's a natural thing, because
if say comes 37, 30 is a fantastic time to apply for professorships in X-ray corps, because then is the time to get a professor. He needs 7-8 years to have a group ready for the launch.
Okay, I think we'll have to cut this discussion short. The time is up, but feel free to discuss it at some other time. Thank you so much. Thank you, panelists.